crime in Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. Gene Wilder has second thoughts about marriage and parenting in Funny About Love. And Gene Hackman and Ann Archer are stalked by the mob in Narrow Margin. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert.
Have a drink. Have a drink. Come on. Have a drink.
Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, and Joe Pesci are brutal mobsters in Martin Scorsese's decidedly unromantic view of the workaday life of New York mobsters in Goodfellas. It's one of the 4 new fall movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. We'll also take a look at the controversy surrounding Spike Lee's most recent movie, Mo Better Blues. He's been charged with anti-Semitism. A look at racial stereotyping later in the show. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Since 1976, when he directed Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese has stood, I think, alone at the top of the art of film directing in the world today. His Raging Bull was generally conceded to be the best film of the decade of the 1980s, and now with Goodfellas, Scorsese has scored another magnificent achievement. This is a great film, a film about Scorsese's favorite subjects, the great tragic subjects like avarice and jealousy, murder and guilt, and it ranks with The Godfather in his portrait of the crime syndicate. The movie stars Ray Liotta in the true story of Henry Hill, an Irish-Italian kid whose only ambition was to work for the mob. He envied the way they seemed to get dates with the best-looking girls and the way the nightclub waiters always seemed to know their names.
Gave them $20 each.
Hey, Henry, this is with Mr. Tony over there. Wait, over there.
Oh, thanks so much, Tony. Thank you. Salute.
That's Lorraine Bracco as his wife, Karen, who discovers that being married to the mob means being absorbed into a self-contained cocoon of mob values and mob friendships. One of Liotta's best friends in the outfit is played here by Joe Pesci, the same great actor who played the kid brother in Raging Bull. He has an out-of-control temper that flares instantly into violence.
Come on, don't be like that.
What do you mean don't be like that?
The movie also stars Scorsese's longtime favorite actor, Robert De Niro, who in this scene tells Liotta that it looks like Pesci's going to make it into the mob's inner circle. He's going to be a made man.
You believe that, this little guinea bastard? Believe that? Huh? Huh? He's gonna get made? We're gonna work for this guy one day. He's gonna be a boss.
What you get in Goodfellas is a portrait of an American life. Young ambition, early promise, a steady rise through the organization, and the business therein is stealing things and killing people. The life of the mafia in this film seems almost hermetically sealed. The characters don't associate with anyone else, and so their values come to seem valid to themselves because nobody disagrees with them. I have never seen even a movie by Scorsese that really wrapped me up so much into the world of the emotions of these people. A day, 2 days after the movie was over, I still, myself, felt guilty, I think identifying with the guilt of the Ray Liotta character. Guilt not only that he did bad things, but the worst kind of guilt, which is the guilt that he still wanted to do them. He wishes he was still doing them.
What is great about this picture and the way it's organized as a movie is that it seems that it would be about this guy who's narrating his life, but I thought the person that took center stage and was really emblematic of what Scorsese and Nick Pileggi, who wrote the book that this film is based on, really think about the mob, is the character played by Joe Pesci, the guy who can explode at any second, who's basically an animal. It's an animal who, when you're verbally insulted, pulls out a gun and shoots you. I've never done that to you on the show, but they play for, he's a pig. And what I love about the film, and what I like about Scorsese's work, is he takes, in a very theatrical, exciting way, moral stands. He makes The Last Temptation of Christ. He makes Raging Bull about, he makes films about sinners and finds the saints and sinners and saints. And this guy, he's saying about the mob, these guys are scum. He says it. That's so refreshing in an artful, beautiful way.
I think I agree with you that Pesci's performance is so important in this movie, and it's so good in this movie. There's not a bad performance in the movie.
No, there isn't.
One that's going to be overlooked is Lorraine Bracco as the wife. She's very important. What's the reason that you're, I think, attracted to Pesci is because the Liotta character is always an outsider. Right. He's not a pure Sicilian. He's half Irish. He can never be a made man in the mob. He's always looking from the outside. He sees it even when he's in the middle of it with a certain objectivity, and so it's told through his point of view. He looks at these guys. He sees how they work with each other, and it's a fascinating movie. It's a great American film.
Okay, I've seen it twice. I'm going back lots more times, and what I'll go back for is small things, editing scenes, the way he jumps in on dialogue, the way there's that whole sequence about when the Ray Liotta character gets into drugs, and it's shot in a whole different fashion because he's high on drugs, and Scorsese, the artist, wants to show us that. It's very
And you could also mention the scene when somebody doesn't realize he's about to get killed, and then he realizes it, and that moment of realization is like a hammer blow from the screen.
What we ought to do is in a couple of weeks after people see this picture, maybe we'll go back and look at it again and talk more about it. Next movie, and our next film, and we take a step down here, is Narrow Margin, and it's one of those old-fashioned melodramas on a railroad train film. In this case, an old-fashioned film that I'm sorry to say is sort of brainless. Gene Hackman stars as a deputy district attorney trying to get the testimony of Ann Archer, an innocent woman who witnessed a mob hit. She's hiding out in a Canadian cabin when Hackman and helper Emmett Walsh ask her to come home to testify.
They'd never find me.
We did.
I'll take my chances.
You know, you might think they would have heard that helicopter coming in the wilderness. Anyway, Hackman survives the attack and jumps on a train with Archer, only to find out that mob hitmen have infiltrated the train, too. Here, one of the mobsters, the solid character actor James B. Sicking, offers Hackman a deal.
I suppose there's two reasons why someone would remain a deputy district attorney. You are either rich or you're afraid to go out on your own.
No, there's a third reason, too. I don't like people like you. And I really don't like people like your boss. I enjoy putting you away, I really do.
I know that a picture like Narrow Margin isn't supposed to be taken seriously. You're supposed to just lean back and enjoy it, but I couldn't because of the obvious writing in the film. And one of the things that really bugged me is that Ann Archer's character was pretty much of a dingbat. I like thrillers where characters are smarter than the audience. That's just not the case in Narrow Margin.
This is one of those movies where you sit through the whole film thinking about thing after thing after thing that isn't consistent, that doesn't pay off, that doesn't make sense, that you can't believe. My favorite speech by Hackman is, "We're safe now. They won't act until morning because they don't have to. So therefore, we can go to sleep or we can wait all night." Then in the morning, when it's time for them to act, he decides he'll go to the diner and get a cup of coffee. "Would you like one?" She says, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea." So he goes to the diner to get the cup of coffee, and what do you know? The bad guys find him there. There were so many ways that anyone in the audience could figure for these people to get off of that train and away from those guys that it wasn't even funny.
That's the biggest thing. In other words, I would have at some point had them get off the train. I would take my chances in the wilderness over these people, especially if I jumped off shortly after the train left the station. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
You know you're in trouble if you've made a thriller, and even movie critics know how you can get away from the killers. Later in the show, a review of The Tall Guy, starring Jeff Goldblum as an American actor in London, playing the Elephant Man in a musical. And coming up next, Gene Wilder and Christine Lottie want to have a baby, but they can't agree about the timing or much of anything else in Funny About Love.
What's this little pocket for?
Ice.
Tell me who the Bulgarian bear wrestler is who made this.
I'm the Bulgarian bear wrestler.
This is delicious.
And even when he does the double take to show that he now realizes he likes this girl, so he's going to praise her coffee, it's not convincing. That's Gene Wilder as a cartoonist, Christine Lottie as the chef he falls in love with, and Funny About Love, a movie that is not funny and is certainly not funny about love, and is one of the most annoying and inept movies I've seen in a long time. Here is a film that has a genius for awkward scenes, dopey dialogue, and sentiment so shameless it is actually offensive. In the movie, Wilder and Lottie get married and want to have a child. The movie's gimmick is that these two people never seem to both want to have a baby at the same time.
Come on, we agreed to wait, right?
Meg, how many more years do you think you can have a child?
When their marriage breaks up, Wilder tries an affair with a young TV producer played by Mary Stuart Masterson.
You are single-handedly responsible for the whole resurgence of political humor for my entire generation.
Well, thanks. I think you have to give a little credit to Ronald Reagan. And maybe Dan Quayle.
Mary Stuart Masterson is the only actor who emerges intact from this mess, maybe because they give her something fairly harmless and peripheral to do, but even she would have had a hard time with some of the dialogue in this movie, which drones on and on and on. and his meaningless, if not offensive, touch me, feel me cliches, and then occasionally he breaks out into the most astonishing bad manners. For example, when
I know what you're going to say.
You know what I'm going to say. When Gene Wilder is there with his sister and his father and the woman that his father wants to marry, and the conversation kind of drags, and somebody says, gee, for this conversation, we could have just kept Mom on life support. I mean, you just want to, scream, you want to throw things at the screen. You know, Farrah Fawcett, her entire character and her entire role were cut out of this movie, and that is one of the biggest breaks in Farrah Fawcett's career.
I didn't even know she was in it. She is lucky. This movie, you know, I don't talk to you during the movies.
No, you don't. No.
Okay. But I said something to you at one point, and I said, I've seen it all. Okay, 21 years I've been doing this job. This is the first time in a comedy that I ever stood up in amazement and shock and horror at a comedy. I got out of my seat, and you know, I don't know if you remember the scene. It is when...
It's in the locker room of the Knicks.
Mary Stuart Masterson takes Gene Wilder to a basketball game. And he gets to meet Patrick Ewing, the big New York Knicks star. And so here's huge Patrick Ewing and Mary Stuart Masterson.
And it's his birthday. Yeah. It's Gene Wilder's birthday.
And so he gets to meet Patrick. He says, and so Patrick says, you know, happy birthday to him or something like that. And then he says, and by the way, she's pregnant.
There are so many lapses in taste and tone and style and consistency in this movie that you would be hard-pressed to keep track of them. At the end, I don't want to give away the ending, assuming anybody stays that long. There's a big shot of something, and everybody goes, oh, my God, and until we get the shot of it, nobody's supposed to have known that whatever that was without giving it away, I can't even say how dumb it is, and let's hope you never find out for yourself. Coming up next, Jeff Goldblum stars as an American actor in London who finds love while his career goes down the drain in the comedy The Tall Guy.
I'm not wearing any underwear.
Large part indeed. In this musical?
You see, the thing is, we feel you have exactly the quality of awkwardness and vulnerability that we're looking for.
That's Jeff Goldblum in the comedy The Tall Guy, playing an American actor in London who is looking for both a good part to play and for a woman to love. Turns out the woman is easier to find. She's a nurse played by Emma Thompson, and she's more honest about sexual attraction than is Goldblum, who's been taking his time getting up the courage to ask her for a date.
I think it's much better to go to bed with the person on the first date to get it out of the way. There's no point in our having 10 expensive dinners if I already know I like you.
They're a fresh couple, but unfortunately the movie doesn't know what to do with them after they make love enthusiastically. So the story switches to Goldblum getting the title role in a ridiculous musical play based on the heavy drama, The Elephant Man.
The ugliest man in the universe.
And a little of that goes a long way. We get a lot of it. There's also a dismal subplot between Goldblum and another more successful actor played by the hilarious British comic actor Rowan Atkinson. He isn't well used here. But my big problem with the film is that I was more interested in the short woman in the story, Emma Thompson, than I was in the tall guy, Goldblum. I wanted more with the two of them.
Boy, I completely disagree with you about this movie. I really thought it was funny, and I really liked it. I thought it was smart, intelligent, sophisticated. It assumed that the audience knew something about the theater. It was able to make references to the theater without having to explain everything and come to a dead halt in order to account for stuff. It's like My Favorite Year or The Producers. It's this kind of hilarious backstage look at the world of theater. This musical Elephant with an exclamation point is the funniest phony musical in the movie since Springtime for Hitler and The Producers.
I thought that this woman was really interesting. There's
a lot of this woman in this movie. Somehow you seem to give the impression...
No, she does one note. She has one note, and the one note seems to be that she's more interested and more...
Well, then why were you interested in her if she only has one note?
Because I wanted more. In other words, she's attractive when she's there, but she isn't there doing enough things.
She's got this whole thing where she's real cold and efficient and brusque and everything, and underneath it, she's got the complications. Well, what's wrong with that?
That's the one joke. I'd like to see more of it. That was interesting. I wanted to see more with her.
We have seen so many dumb comedies, including one we just reviewed. Here's a comedy with brains.
If you're saying that this is better than the last movie we saw,
well,
so is
any movie would be, but this is a good movie.
I don't think so.
A lot of critics have charged that Spike Lee has painted two of his characters in his new film as anti-Semitic stereotypes, and Gene and I will discuss that controversy when we come back.
stereotyping in the movies has a long and dishonorable tradition, especially in supporting characters who pop on the screen and have to declare themselves in just a scene or two. We've often seen the lazy black man, the Italian mobster, the bloodthirsty Indian, more recently the Arab terrorist. That means stereotyping went on in Hollywood for years before filmmakers like Spike Lee began decrying racial name-calling, as in his great film, Do the Right Thing, where he gives us a race-baiting scene to end all others.
Fried chicken and biscuit-eating monkey ate baboon.
Little slanty-eyed, Mino-speaky American, own every fruit and vegetable stand in New York.
You Goya bean eating, 15 in a car, 30 in an apartment, pointy shoes, red wearing.
No! Hold up! Time out!
That scene is an important, needed statement, but in the last month, Spike Lee himself has been charged with racial stereotyping in his latest film, the jazz drama Mo Better Blues. He portrayed the owners of the jazz club where Denzel Washington performs as glib Jewish money grubbers, even adding an unflattering light bouncing off their eyeglasses. They were the Flatbush brothers, Mo and Josh, and shortly after the movie was released, complaints from a wide variety of critics and jazz writers and Jewish groups followed, and articles with titles like Spike Lee's Jews and Charges of Racism, The Bigotry of Spike Lee. Lee himself replied in an article in the New York Times declaring flatly that he wasn't anti-Semitic, that his movies were being scrutinized far too closely because he was black, and that too big a deal was being made out of a couple of characters with precious little screen time. When I asked him directly about it before all the negative press started, he told me he didn't think that the club owners were any more representative of Jewish people than his vulgar, fat, black comic in the same film was representative of African Americans. Of course, the obvious difference is that the Flatbush brothers were the only Jewish characters in the movie. Now, neither Roger nor I made any mention of the stereotyping in our original review on this show. Roger said after the taping, in fact, that he didn't realize the Flatbush boys were Jewish. He thought they were simply New Yorkers. I knew they were Jewish, didn't like the stereotyping, thought they were truly minor in the story, and thought and still think that Spike Lee has a right to portray his characters any way he wants. And then in the past month, I thought about the truth. And the truth would be that some jazz club owners must have been truly tight-fisted with money. And maybe Spike Lee wanted these guys to stand in for all white businessmen who he thinks have exploited black talent over the years. But still, I believe the truth must have been that even the most tight-fisted jazz club owner did love jazz. You don't go into that profession simply to make a buck. There are easier ways to do that. And if Spike Lee had included just one line of dialogue from either Josh or Mo Flatbush saying something like, yeah, we're tough, but we love your music, I don't think Lee's critics would have a leg to stand on. And what I learned from that is how precious a single line of dialogue in a movie can be. It can make the difference between an ugly stereotype and a provocative portrait.
Well, I think you make a very intelligent argument about this issue, Gene, and I've thought about it a lot because originally, as you said, I didn't realize they were even supposed to be Jewish. And now, of course, I realize how naive I am, and I must come from some small town in downstate Illinois where everybody who isn't from there comes from Mars.
Or New York.
I think people were disappointed in Spike Lee because in Do the Right Thing, they saw and heard unmistakably this important new voice that was reaching out to all races in America and saying, look, we got to listen to each other and we got to talk to each other or we're not going to get anywhere. And then they didn't like to see him doing in this movie what he wouldn't like other people to do in other movies. It happens all the time. Hollywood, as you said, has a long, long history of racial stereotyping. In a movie we did on this show, Narrow Margin, the superior officer is a black man who tries to obstruct Gene Hackman's pursuit of justice. This is a new cliche in the movies. Now, instead of the black being the janitor, he's now the superior. He got kicked upstairs. He still doesn't get to be in the middle of the movie. And so we have the black cop who is now calling the heroes on. He's always the chief. This is a new cliche. These cliches happen all the time, and I think the answer is, if an effort is made, as you say, to make the character into a three-dimensional human being, to show that he has many, many different elements that make up his personality, then you can't make this charge. I think Spike left himself open.
One line doesn't take a long time, but it would have been dead on. And then every other charge that he may legitimately feel about exploitation of black talent would still hold up.
Coming up next, we'll take another look at the movies we reviewed on this program. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this show. Two very admiring thumbs up for Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas, a story of everyday life in the mob. We both think it's clearly one of the year's best films. Two thumbs down, though, for a narrow margin, the limp and disappointing train chase thriller with Gene Hackman and Ann Archer. Two more thumbs down, way, way down for Funny About Love, but a split decision on The Tall Guy with Jeff Goldblum and Emma Thompson in love. I thought it was smart and funny. Gene thought the musical satire went on too long, and there is no question but that Goodfellas is the movie to go out and see for a great experience.
This is great filmmaking, and you can see it again. I'd love to see a double bill with the whole Godfather saga at the end of this year when we get part 3. It's quite special. The high and low this week, Goodfellas in the high, and Funny About Love way down low.
Way, way low. That's
it for this week. Next time we'll be back with reviews of Texasville, starring Jeff Bridges and Sybil Shepherd in the sequel to The Last Picture Show, and also Pacific Heights, starring Michael Keaton as the deranged tenant of landlords Melanie Griffith and Matthew Modine. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.